You're listening to the Confident Choice podcast with me, Dr. Roberto Garcia, a double board certified facial plastic and reconstructive surgeon. Honest conversations and expert advice about the decisions that make you feel your best. Welcome everybody to episode 3 of the Confident Choice. I'm your host, Dr. Roberto Garcia from sunny Ponte Vedra Beach, and last week we had a great podcast, and we talked about common things to find and consider during the consultation process, and what we as surgeons are looking to discover in the consultation process, and what we think is important for you, the patient, to be asking and considering during the consultation process. So if you have a chance and you weren't able to hear it, go back and find that episode on all the social media platforms, and you'll be able to really get a lot of, I think, very useful information. And that last episode kind of segues into what I want to talk about today, and that's what are these common fears of facial plastic surgery, and why are there fears? And you know, it's an interesting thing, because as I've digested this concept throughout the years, I've come to the conclusion that people are afraid of plastic surgery because of a fear of the unknown. They're not 100% sure or confident that they're going to be happy with the result. You know, it's kind of that those movie scenes from the 80s and 90s where somebody would have plastic surgery and their whole face is bandaged, and then all of a sudden the surgeon comes in a week, which, by the way, your face is never bandaged for a week, and anybody who does that, you need to be worried about. But they're bandaged for a week, and they come in and the surgeon removes the bandages, and the person looks in the mirror and says, oh no, this is not what I wanted. So it's not like that. And the word plastic surgery comes from a Greek term, plastikos, which means to mold. And it's in the process of molding that patients can get a little bit uncomfortable. So it's that end-all question in our field of transformation versus preservation. And there are times that transformation is acceptable. There are times that transformation is not acceptable. And I always aspire for the concept of preservation, especially when it comes to aging face surgery. And so what I'm really trying to get to is, in any aging face situation, the way that you keep a very natural look, and I could get into the anatomy of it, but that's kind of boring for this particular venue. What you're trying to achieve is an alteration of the aging delta. Okay, so let me explain that. You get a 45-year-old person. That person then becomes 55-year-old. They don't like what they look like at 55. You're not altering an entire lifespan of aging. You're altering that 10-year delta. Okay? That is how you keep a natural look. Because a patient who comes to see me and says, well, you know, I really liked it when I was 25 years old. Well, you know what? So did I. But that doesn't look good on a 55-year-old. Okay? And that'll never happen naturally. And so you have to age gracefully, as Sophia Loren said one time. And it's that timeless, almost endless form of beauty that the aging, how aging has affected you is just a few years behind the numerical value on your driver's license. right? And so you don't need to be 25 or 35 when you're 55. You look great when you're in your 40s. You look elegant. You look naturally beautiful. You look fitting for the time. And so that whole idea of preservation of beauty, preservation of youth, is an altering that delta that has changed you from that individual who really liked the way they looked, wasn't concerned at all, was probably saying to themselves and their girlfriends when they would go to have breakfast or lunch, you know what, I'm never going to do this. That person versus this one that's now in my office saying, something's wrong, I need to correct it, I don't like A, B, C, or D. And so that's the idea behind preservation of beauty. And that's a very important point. There are times in our field where, yes, there is some level of transformation, a respectable transformation. Rhinoplasties, ear surgery, chin surgery, where you are transforming the skeleton of the face and you are allowing it to be aesthetically more balanced with the rest of the face. And again, there's kind of a caveat to the argument of transformation, and that's that transformation is fantastic as long as it falls within the purview of facial balance. And as long as I transform a nose, that nose, or the ill appearance of that nose, no longer is apparent. That's acceptable transformation. If I'm transforming a nose to where now the transformed nose draws attention to itself, that's not good. Same thing with ear surgery, chin surgery, anywhere where you're skeletally altering the face. All you want to do is make that transformation to where other features of the face, other beauty enhancing features of the face now accentuate. That's it. And so the way that you achieve that natural look, which ultimately is what everybody's after. I can't tell you how many years I've been doing this, and I can count on my hands the number of times that a patient has come in and says, no, I don't want natural, okay? I want everybody to know that I've had surgery. And that to me is going along with our last week's episode in the consultation. That's a huge red flag to a surgeon, okay? Because any surgeon who witnesses a patient saying, I want to look like a different person, then you have to question where their mental state is, right? And that's not a good place for anybody to be. And so there's a situation where we may want to consider, okay, we're not ready for surgery right now. We need to look at we need to heal other things first, you know? And so the way that plastic surgery was done, even up until the early 2000s, and I saw parts of it towards the latter, in the latter parts of my training, I saw some of that. The unnaturalness, really the misconception of surgeons not knowing how the face aged. And so that theory of, you see an old surgeon and he tells the young surgeon, well, I've been doing it like this for 40 years. And the young surgeon responds, and this actually happened to me, and I responded to this older surgeon. I said, well, you just found 40 years of doing it wrong. You know, so you've perfected doing it wrong. And the way that facial aesthetics is supposed to be done, and now we know, due to a lot of modalities that have given us deeper understanding of facial anatomy and the way that the face ages and vectors and pools, and the preservation of certain tissues within the face that allow us to create a more aesthetically balanced face, we're now seeing more of that natural look, right? I mean, it used to be that on television you would see these fake plastic appearing faces, right? I mean, how many actresses that we know from the 70s and 80s that they had too much done, and you say, well, there it goes, it's too late now. But now you go and watch the news and you say to yourself, she's how old? You're shocked that this newscaster is 65, 70 years old. because they've subscribed to that timeless beauty, right? Treating that delta, not trying to alter the natural course of the face. And we have, as a specialty, as a facial plastic surgery, as a specialty, I can tell you I'm exceedingly proud to be part of a specialty that you look at the work when you go to meetings and you say, wow, this is good. This person looks like themselves, but you would never tell it until you put the before and after right next to each other. And like I tell my patients, is you will not walk into a room and somebody notice what you have done. And it's funny because I just had a patient reach out to me when we were introducing the podcast, and she said that she wanted to be a guest. And one of the things that you will find in this specialty and the way that we do things is people might come up to you afterwards and say, all right, look, I've been staring at you at this party from a distance, and I gotta know, is there something different? I mean, you look like you're glowing. And then patients will say, yeah, you know, I had some work done, I had my eyelids done, or I had my chin corrected, and they'll say, there's no way. That's what you're supposed to look for. And so it's interesting that in a day when everybody's on social media, everybody's on Facebook, Instagram, taking photos of themselves, selfies, everybody wants to broadcast who they are, the proper work is more silent. You know, it's almost as if social media was about 40 years late. It would have done great in the 70s and 80s when everybody looked like, holy cow, something was done. And now we have photography at our fingertips, videography at our fingertips, and the work is more salient, right? It's more respectful of the naturality of the face. And I got to tell you that this is probably the most exciting time to be part of this specialty. The idea that somebody notices something. Well, I'll give you an example. There was this young girl who came to see me in consultation over the summer. This was years ago. And she was being teased by girls at school about her nose. Cyberbullied, okay? Back in my day, when I was younger, there was no cyberbullying. If you bullied somebody, it was eye to eye, and there was a good chance you were going to take home a knuckle sandwich. Did I just age myself by saying knuckle sandwich? Should I have a t-shirt rolled up in my jeans elevated? I'm trying to keep it PG. Anyway, but now due to this cyberbullying, this young girl and her mother came in to see me for a consultation, and they were both in tears. Broke my heart. Because the girl literally had a very similar name to my youngest daughter, looked like her, similar age, and it just crushed my heart. And I said, all right, listen, this is what we're going to do. And there was something that needed to be corrected, okay? So once we got past the emotional discourse, so to speak, and I began to see that her intentions were right, I told her, we're going to correct your nose, but take your glasses off. We're going to do it over Christmas break. I want you to get contact lenses. Trim your hair. This girl who had been bullied for what she told me was years, and this quiet, demure girl who barely spoke, has her nose done. You remember this story. Has her nose corrected over Christmas, cuts her hair, takes the glasses off. She goes back to school in January. Not one person noticed that she had her nose done, but she never heard one more thing from bullying. all of a sudden it was off the map. One teacher, she said, came up to her and said, "Did you, something different about your eyes?" And she said, "Well, I got contact lens." She goes, "It's incredible. You're beautiful." And if I tell you that the difference in this before and after is massive, but you would never know. Because all of a sudden, what did we do? We took a disproportionate nose, or I should say, a nose that was disproportionate to the face, and we made the nose blend into the face now. It fit in now. So now all of a sudden it wasn't a distraction, which is the primordial definition of correction of issues of the face. And that is, as a surgeon, you are correcting the things that draw beauty away from the face. You are not trying to bring beauty back into the face. Beauty's already there. What we're supposed to be doing is taking away the ills so that the beauty rises. It's like, what is it? Creamer in milk versus whatever. It rises to the top. You take out the bad, right? Probably not the best analogy. But either way. And so that has been one of the most inspirational parts of my specialty, is in seeing the beauty come out of these faces due to the fact that it's natural, due to the fact that no one could tell. But what they see is that the overall impression, the overall view of the face is drastically better. So that's gonna end the things that I want to talk about this week with regards to naturalness. But we are gonna go on to our second segment, which is my favorite segment, as everybody already knows. Now, Dad told me years ago, and it's funny because Michael Jordan is one of my favorite athletes of all times, you know that? And Michael Jordan was, as you know, he was cut, or he wasn't technically cut. He didn't make the varsity team. So he gets put on the JV team, he wasn't tall enough, yada yada. He grows something like 4 inches over the summer, dominates his junior and senior year, ends up at UNC, wins the national championship, ends up transforming NBA basketball, right? But what did Michael Jordan do better than anybody else? He outworked everyone. When people were tired, when people were wanting to go out and party, he was shooting jump shots. He was shooting foul shots. I went to high school with Chipper Jones, right? You know Chipper.
Yeah, just on Friday.
Yeah. Chipper was the first guy on the field, and Chipper was the last guy in the batting cage every single day. And he had the skill. But what defines mediocrity and success is that you are willing to work when everybody else is resting. And that was something that my dad told me, and I pass it on to my children. That on Saturday night, when everybody's wanting to party, if you're the only guy in the library, you're probably gonna get something done that day. But if you're studying and you're working when everybody else is studying and working, you're never getting ahead. So the definition of a champion isn't the natural skill or talent that God's given you. God gives everybody talents and skills in one way or another. The world is filled with smart people who live under a bridge, right? People who had 1500s on their SATs and were never able to apply it to real life. The defining characteristic of success is grinding when everybody else is resting. That's it. And so I hear my dad's voice in my head every time I tell my son that. And he probably gets a little annoyed at the fact that I'm telling him, but if there's anything you guys can pass on to your children that my dad passed on to me is, be the first guy in the building, be the last one to leave. Never complain about the work, because the work is helping build your character in your future, and it's helping build your legacy. So with that, I am signing off. Our next episode is what's the recovery going to be like? And that sounds like it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun because it's me. Okay, we're going to make it fun. And with that, I'll close off with our mantra, good decisions always come from good information. But I hope you guys have a great week. Thanks again for everything.